Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... This weekend, I'm reviewing The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. And even though I had read this classic before, I wanted to revisit it and bring a few poor unfortunate souls with me to meet the Cenobites. Now, out of the people included in the buddy reading group I constructed, I first went to Connie and said, you have to read this book with me, which I had been hounding her for years to try Barker. So, since she finally took the plunge, she's included in this review as well as a special guest. Also, since Carrie loved the Hellraiser movies, he decided to buddy read this with us, but he politely declined from being a part of this review, so we'll miss him. Then I ended up going to our good online friends, Hanny and John, and explained to them this is what we were about to read and invited them to jump on board, which they did. And then, to my surprise, my niece Abby wanted to read something creepy, so I invited her to join the party. And out of everyone who read this, Hanny, Connie, and Abby had no clue what they were getting into, so as we read, I was just gleefully enjoying every single second where they were like, WTF. So, yeah, that was great. But... anywho, before I ramble everyone's ears off, let's see what's been new with Connie.
Hey guys, it is so good to be back. I'm so excited to dive into Hellbound Heart. I loved it. Everything's been pretty much the usual with me. Work, home. I'm getting ready to put my fall decorations out. It is my favorite time of the year. Oh, I love this time of the year. I did try a new recipe, Philly cheesesteak sloppy joes. It was so good. Recommend it.
Send me the recipe.
I will. I will. And my baby, my Ben is back in school. He started first grade. He's loving it. Loving it. And can I tell a quick funny story?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
About the first full week of school, it was a Wednesday. Get off work, I called my mom, asked her how's Ben, because he was at the house. How was his day at school? She said, fine, he got a purple. I was like, a purple? What's purple? What's this purple? What did he do? Did he try to kill the teacher? What's happening? What is this purple? He has never gotten a purple before. What is this purple? Turns out, because he made great choices. It was good.
Oh, so that's like a color he gets awarded or something.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They get a color at the end of the day, depending on if you were good or bad or whatever. And normally he'd always got like a green, which is ready to learn, or yellow, which is a warning. He never got no purple.
Yeah, I would kind of think like red, yellow, green, you know?
But that's apparently purple, blue, pink, and he never got those colors. And he was so excited. He was so proud of himself. He told Aunt Connie, I'm going to get a pink tomorrow. I'm going to get a pink. The next day he goes to school, he gets a blue. He was happy. Now I got a blue. Friday, he got his pink. He got a pink, which was the best one you could get. He made excellent choices that day.
So that's why y'all had Domino's one night,
yeah.
Huh? Okay.
Yeah.
All
We got to reward him. We got to reward him.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty much what's been new with me.
Cool. Well, now that we've been caught up to date, it's time to see what horrors await us in the house on Lodovico Street. So here's our copies of The Hellbound Heart, and Connie's copy is a little bit newer than mine, but I've actually had this edition ever since I was in 6th grade, and it is still in mint condition.
It's awesome.
And I love this cover because it is so beautiful, it's creepy, and hopefully you can see it well like this. Hopefully it's not too much of a blur. But as you see, there is a male figure who seems to be getting pleasured by non-human entities, which I think that might be Frank.
I think so.
And so that kind of insinuates to me that we see some pleasure going on here. But if you flip the book upside down, you get a whole other image. And this one has always just really made me feel like there's nothing but pain here. It looks more horrific in the face. It looks more void of any type of pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this cover because of its duality. And it really comments well on the duality of this book in regards to how pain and pleasure are compared throughout. Okay, so bragging aside, The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker introduces a hedonist by the name of Frank,
Mm-hmm.
who has indulged in all of his perversities and he's ready to go beyond the limit.
Mm-hmm.
Which, thanks to a guy by the name of Kircher, Frank has purchased a puzzle known as Le Marchand's Box. And it's said that upon opening this box, it summons entities known as Cenobites who reside in the higher realms of pleasure. But unbeknownst to Frank, when he opens this box, he gets more than what he bargained for, and he is taken to a world where there are no limits, and the ultimate pain is the ultimate pleasure.
A year later, after Frank's disappearance, the story shifts to Rory, who was Frank's little brother. And since their deceased grandmother willed her house to both brothers, and since Frank is gone, he's MIA, he's disappeared, Rory and his wife Julia decide to move in. And little do they know, this is the exact house where Frank summoned the Cenobites.
As the plot thickens, secret affairs and secret desires that have remained hidden in the shadows come to light as old flames start to rekindle. And now it is up to Julia to determine what disturbing lengths she will go to regain what she lost. However, she must act fast because soon the Cenobites will return. The Hellbound Heart was first published in 1986 in the third volume of the anthology series Night Visions. It also served the basis for the 1987 movie adaptation known as Hellraiser, and in 2015, the Hellbound Heart would receive a new installment called The Scarlet Gospels. In an interview for The Guardian by Phil Hode, Barker explained that because he needed money, he worked as a hustler in the 70s. And due to his experiences, he wanted to tell a story about good and evil in which sexuality was the connective tissue. The appearance of the Cenobites was inspired by S&M clubs, such as an underground club called Cell Block 28 in New York, where people were getting pierced for fun. When Barker directed and wrote the film adaptation, he considered naming the film Sadomasochist from Hell. In an interview for Nightmare Magazine, Barker explained Pinhead, or the character called Pinhead by some, was a minor character in that book. But people liked him, not so much the book. But when the movie came along, people really liked the character.
5 facts!
I am so damn sick of you stealing my thunder. You know what? This is gonna happen, Connie. You're getting sent straight to hell.
No, I'm not.
Oh shit, it's just a music box. Carry out! Carry out! You motherfucker!
Since the release of Hellraiser, the book's nameless secondary Cenobite, who later came to be known as Pinhead, has appeared in 10 movies, not including the upcoming Hulu adaptation, and he has also appeared in a comic series that was simply titled Hellraiser. In an interview for Nightmare Magazine, Barker stated, "I'm really proud of the comic books in a way that I'm not really proud of any of the sequels to the movie." As Hellraiser took form into a movie, Roger Corman's company, New World, funded the film for $900,000 and said it would go straight to video. The American censors gave it an X rating, and to get an R rating, scenes of spankings were removed and the violence was shortened. In Bravo's Top 100 Scariest Movie Moments, Barker said that while Pinhead never did one good thing throughout the movies, he has received tons of fan mail from women who expressed they wanted to bear Pinhead's children.
Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoilers segment, which, if you haven't read this before, we're about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you would like to click away, just scroll down to the comments and you'll see that we have a pinned comment at the top with the timestamp in it. Once you click on that timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this, so...
I have such sights to show you.
Carrie, I don't think the Cenobites meant full frontal nudity. Now that everyone's had the opportunity to click away, here are a few of our favorite moments.
Now, first up is the opening scene where Frank meets the Cenobites. Now, this comes about after Frank opens the puzzle box and it creates this doorway between our world and the supernatural realm. Now, once the Cenobites arrive, they are described as these 4 sexless beings. And as expected, these things are absolutely monstrous. You got the leader here who has his eyelids hooked to his lips. You got another one that has pins stuck in its head. And you got another one whose wounds are so great, his mouth is disfigured and his eyes are swollen. And after Frank demands that they show him their world, he experiences a painful sensory overload. Painful. And after things start to calm down, the 4th Cenobite appears, and she looks like a hooded woman sitting on rotted heads. She appears and carries them off.
Good stuff.
This is probably my favorite scene in the book. I mean, it really set the stage for what was to come. And the way the Cenobites were described, it really made them seem disturbing, real, original. Loved it.
Iconic.
Iconic. Loved it. And the ride they took Frank on, baby. He only thought what he wanted. I mean, it really felt like you were going on this journey with him, you know, when he was experiencing all this pain and this, what he thought he was going to be getting pleasure. You know, it really felt like you were going on it with him. My toes curled. My toes curled.
What did it for me with that moment was how, even though he was in all this pain, he still, like, masturbated right there. It was just, like, crazy.
Pain and pleasure go together. You know, that's their kink.
Oh.
You know, do you. And it really brought home, you know, the old saying, be careful what you wish for. Because he only thought he wanted all this pleasure.
Whole other level.
Whole other level. Mm.
So, one of my favorite moments was Frank's reveal.
Mm.
Now, this comes about after Rory has injured his hand by, like, chiseling a door, and he goes to Julia, who is in the damp room. And since he bleeds on the floor where Frank died, his blood brings Frank back to life. And after a little time passes, Rory and Julia are having a dinner party. And Julia excuses herself to bed, but on her way to bed, she makes a detour in the damp room.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when the door closes behind her, and another doorway from the brick wall that should not be there opens up. And this is when Frank crawls out, and it's described that he's this horrible thing that looks like it's been taken apart and sewn back together. He has missing parts. He has areas where there's rotted skin, but there's also a lot of areas where you can see his veins, just exposed veins. And what really tripped me out here, because everyone knows how I am about body horror, there is an eyeball in his spine. I'm gonna cheat a little bit here, because not only do I love how Frank's reveal was described, but I really love the sequence. For starters, when Rory's blood disappears, we really don't know what's happened to the blood. Instead, we just have where Julia asks Rory, hey, did you clean it up? And when he's like, no, I didn't clean it up, and she admits, well, I didn't clean it up either, that to me is creepy as hell.
Right.
Because we know neither one of them cleaned it up.
What?
And whatever happened to it, we know is not good. And I can only imagine how readers felt the first time they read this. and they had no context on what was going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just, it makes my skin crawl. Even though when I read this, I knew what was happening, it's still just that mystery that lingers.
Mm-hmm.
Also, seeing Frank in this condition made me realize the Cenobites truly did a number on him. And even though the process is not described on what his body underwent, it allowed my imagination to wander. And I truly started to question, like, exactly what all they had done to him, how long did this take, and was he coherent for the full process?
Right, you got questions.
Ugh.
My next favorite moment was when Kirsty and Frank first interacted. Now, this comes about as Kirsty is watching the house when she sees Julia bringing a man to the house on Ludovico Street. Now, unbeknownst to Kirsty, Julia has been luring all these men there, feeding them to Frank so he can get stronger. Now, she wastes a few minutes of time, goes by, and then she sneaks them into the house because she is convinced, that Julia is having an affair.
And wants to catch a red-handed.
And wants to catch a red-handed.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Instead, once she gets inside, she finds Frank and Julia's victim, who is now at this point just this shriveled up mess, this disgusting little thing, because, Frank has done sucked him dry. He's done killed him. And before Kirsty can escape, Frank gets her into the damp room. Now, they start battling it out, and Kirsty realizes this is Frank, the Frank that she hates. And, at this point in their fight, she ends up grabbing the box because she's going to beat him with it. And then she notices and sees that he wants this box. So she's smart and she throws the box out the room in the damp room, the window in the damp room. And she hauls butt. Smart girl. She hauls butt. She gets outside, she gets the box, and she keeps on running. I really liked this scene a lot. It really gave me such good Final Girl vibes.
Yes.
It really did. Like when Frank and Kirsty meet, it really was such a cat and mouse action-packed moment. And, when Frank gets Kirsty into the damp room, my adrenaline was pumping. I was like, oh my God, what's about to happen? Is she going to live? What's going on? And luckily, my girl Kirsty is pretty smart. She distracted Frank, threw the box out the window and to get out the room, to get away from it. She ran like I would. Like, I ain't trying to figure nothing else out. I know it's bad. I'm gone. She hauled butt. She left. She is smart. And I really liked the Kirsty character. I mean, she was a little naive, but she was smart and she was sweet and she really kicked butt.
She truly did, yeah.
She did. I love Kirsty.
My final favorite moment was the end.
Oh, yes.
Which, going into this, Kirsty's curiosity had gotten the better of her, and she opened up the puzzle box. Which, upon doing so, the Cenobites came for her. But unlike when they had come for Frank, they don't give her a choice in regards to if she wants to go or not.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they explain that they can't return across the schism empty-handed. Well, since Kirsty is thinking on her toes and she's a smart girl to start with, she explains that she can take them to Frank, who had escaped them.
Mm-hmm.
And after the Cenobites agree to this, they explain that she has to get Frank to confess who he is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, upon her arriving at the house on Ludovico Street, she doesn't understand that Frank has actually killed Rory, and he is now wearing Rory's skin.
Mm-hmm.
Which, because of Kirsty believing that Frank is dead, she now thinks that she's screwed. Yeah. However, because of Frank being the skis that he is, he says his catchphrase, which is, "Come to Daddy." And because of him saying that, everything clicks in her head, and she realizes that she has a fighting chance, and all she has to do is get Frank to confess his name. No joke. Even though I've read this book before, and I've seen the movie a million times,
right,
every time it comes down where Frank has to confess who he is, I am on the edge of my seat,
Oh.
screaming, just like, hurry up before it's too late for Kirsty. And I don't know why this moment affects me so greatly, because it's not like it's going to change from the last time I read it or saw the movie. Now, aside from that, Hanny had brought to our attention that the Cenobites had treated Kirsty differently than Frank. Because when the Cenobites went to Frank, they had given him a choice to go with them.
Right.
But with Kirsty, they explained that she has to go with them because they can't return across the schism empty-handed.
Right.
And she was wondering exactly why this is. Which, personally, to be honest, I had never really thought about this until she had brought it up. And while we all agreed that Barker is way too brilliant of an author to make a continuity error like this, it did cause us to question why there was a difference.
I wonder, even if Frank had said no, would the Cenobites have forced him to go with them?
I had thought about that as well, because after reading over it again, it really seemed like they posed this question to him in a form of foreplay or teasing. And even if he had said no, I think they still would have brought him with them, because I really don't believe he had any choice whatsoever.
I wonder, since the Cenobites knew that Frank was aware, they wanted to keep that going a little bit, to savor it for as long as they could, whereas, since Kirsty was oblivious what was going on, they wanted to meet her with demands.
And, this book does focus on submission and dominance a great deal, and it does make sense that if they had gone to Frank, since he was more of a dominant force, they wanted to try to play a submissive role as well as they could. And so instead of demanding he go with them, they asked. And with Kirsty, with her being a female, I could see her being perceived as being submissive. So maybe in their minds they were like, well, we have to meet this with a dominance. We have to play these roles with these people. So that could be a reason why each individual is treated differently.
Maybe it's like what Hanny said, it's all a game of desire and knowing your opponent.
It could be. And even though I had said that perhaps the Cenobites wanted to tease him or have some foreplay going on with how they asked him if he wanted to go with them or not, maybe under a different context, maybe they're actually entities who like for people to confess their desires. Maybe they're entities who get off on that confession. And that would make more sense, I think, because with them being so adamant of Frank having to confess that he wants to go with them, we're met with that same degree at the end of the book where they want Frank to confess who he is. So they could easily be entities who enjoy confessions.
Yeah, it could be anything, really.
It could be. And if anyone would like to weigh in on this, feel free to do so in the comments. But just please mark your comment as a spoiler, because we don't want to ruin the experience for anyone else. We would like to take this opportunity to bitch.
And today, I would love to take the time to bitch about that little twit, Julia. I do not like Julia. She is a snob with a nasty little attitude. She really strikes me as the type of person that you cannot satisfy. Never gonna make her happy, no matter what you do. Not possible, not gonna happen.
We know people like that.
We do. And then how she treated poor Rory, her husband, who was a sweetheart. I mean, she cheated on him with his brother, was pining away for him. And then she went on a little killing spree, trying to bring her dead lover, creepy lover, back to life. Trying to help him. And as she lured those poor unsuspecting men to their deaths without a thought. I mean, she really developed this really callous, oh well attitude about it. Like, oh well, they died, oh well.
Time to go to the market.
Time to go to the market, time to go get another fish, whatever, And when she got hers, I cheered, let me tell you, when Frank got her butt, I was like, yes.
I would like to take this opportunity to bitch about Frank.
Ooh.
Now, before I get started, I would just like to note that I had seen the movie long before ever reading this book, so every time I read this, I see the guy who acted as Frank in the movies in the book as that character, which, I'm not gonna lie, Frank was one fine piece of toxic ass.
Mm-hmm.
And, with that said, I don't want you to think for 1 second I would have pulled the same shit that Julia did. Because at the end of the day, this asshole ain't good for nothing else than to hit it, quit it, then block on Facebook. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
And another thing is, this whole time, Frank is nothing but a trifling son of a bitch. I mean, no one needs this egotistical, prideful asshole in their life. And while Julia is going out, busting her ass, bringing home men to feed him, Frank may as well have just been slapping her on the ass and saying, bitch, go make me a sandwich.
Right.
And I can't think of a single summer sausage that is so damn good that I gotta kill for it, much less bob for apples on it after it's been to the underworld and back. Like, you don't know where that fucking meat has been.
Oh.
The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker is a groundbreaking splatterpunk classic that has stood the test of time. Mm-hmm. And if you like to coordinate what you read with a specific time of year, the majority of this book does take place in September.
And not only that, the book gives us these unforgettable villains, an iconic final girl that myself and the group really quickly became engaged with. And while we were having our discussions, we really noticed that the book had a lot of symbolism in it. And among its themes, it focused greatly on duality, religion, and how closely related pain is to pleasure.
Character-wise, we don't want to waste any time gushing about how fleshed out these characters were, because they were awesome characters, and I think almost everyone knows that. But more importantly, I would like to share with everyone that upon reading this as a group, Carrie brought to our attention that he noticed a duality between the characters of Julia and Kirsty, which we really can't get into details because of spoilers, but he did say that upon comparing the two, he noticed where they both had secret desires. However, only one of them acted on those desires.
Right.
And because of her doing that, the outcome was pretty disastrous. And aside from what they had in common, he said that the storm scene was really interesting because as the bad weather started to come in, Kirsty remained content. However, Julia was the complete opposite. And he said that this really surprised him considering what all Julia had done. Yet the duality goes a little bit further beyond those two characters because we have the Cotton brothers to consider and how polar opposite they are despite them sharing the same blood.
And also, Carrie pointed out the chapters where the text swapped perspectives between the characters without warning. And upon discussing that, we really felt that they did that to bring the characters into focus and get that hint that they were similar.
Next up, symbolism is huge with this book. Like, at the beginning, Frank has built an altar for the Cenobites, and he's rubbed the floorboards down with some flowers and petals. And even though there is a lot of description going on here, in our group chat, John had noted that Barker never mentioned what type of flowers or petals these were that Frank had used. And when we had read this, we all immediately just saw this being roses that were either red, white, or pink.
Mm-hmm.
However, since a flower is never described with its species or what color its petals are,
Mm-hmm.
this could make a huge difference in what it represents for the story.
Mm-hmm.
So, after we debated this, we came to the conclusion that perhaps Barker deliberately left this open so we could project whatever we wanted onto those petals.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the altar that Frank built, what we have here is some bones, bonbons, needles, a jug of Frank's urine that was collected over a period of 7 days, and a plate of dove's heads. Now, out of everything listed here, we really felt like the bones were a representation of death, the bonbons were a representation of pleasure, and the needles a representation of pain. While it remains a mystery exactly why some of the things are there on the altar, it specifically stated that Frank collected the urine in case the Cenobites require some kind of self-defilement. And we do find it interesting that Frank collected his urine over the course of 7 days, because 7 is a holy number that represents completion and perfection.
Also, I felt since doves usually represent peace and love,
Mm-hmm.
them being beheaded suggested that peace and love were being perverted.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, doves are seen to be messengers, so maybe this was really a disturbing call for the Cenobites. But as we were discussing this in the chat, John mentioned that there was another possibility because he explained that the sacrifice of doves was normally done as a guilt offering to purify oneself after a period of ritual impurity.
Mm-hmm. And then we had the Cenobites, which we all kind of found it interesting that they were described as smelling like vanilla. And as we were discussing this, John mentioned that he had discovered that among all of its benefits, vanilla essential oils was libido enhancement. And with its metaphysical properties, it enhances sensuality, romance, and sexuality. And once upon a time was actually also a highly sought after potent aphrodisiac. And aside from the smell, we noticed that every time the Cenobites would arrive, they were preceded by bells. And after we're discussing this, John has shared a link that explains bells can represent an ending, beginning, or a warning, and they can also be used to announce an arrival or to call upon someone.
Theme-wise, this book focuses a great deal on duality,
Mm-hmm.
which we've already spoken about how this is seen with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one particular moment that I would like to bring to everyone's attention because I couldn't stop thinking about it. But with the dinner party scene, I made a connection between how Rory spilled blood had been consumed and how Rory, Julia, and their dinner party guests were all eating a calf's liver.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I kind of thought it was weird because I wouldn't serve, like, liver and onions at a dinner party,
Mm-mm.
but I started to consider that perhaps this does take place in Britain,
Mm-hmm.
and if that's the case, I understand that liver and onions is pretty popular in the UK and Germany,
Mhm.
so there's that.
Right.
But the more I thought about it, I ended up tying a biblical reference to it because in the Bible, it's stated that you can eat beef, but it preaches against eating blood and fat.
Yeah.
So, taking that into consideration with how the eating habits are and the characters,
Mm-hmm.
I considered that we have Rory and his party guest who are eating clean and obeying biblical rules.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the antagonist who's rebelling against those rules and is feasting on blood.
Right.
So, yeah, that was just a duality sort of deal that maybe my own mind conceived, but
I can see that.
yeah, I couldn't unsee it.
Right. And what you just said brings us to the topic of religion. Now, other than the 7-day urine collection that we had already mentioned, I had noticed how Rory and Julia had decided to move into the house on Little Vigo Street on a Sunday. Now, I kind of saw this as foreshadowing because in the Bible it states those that do not observe Sabbath and keep that day holy, observing the Lord, are to be punished by death.
By the way, I would like to point out Barker's use of the word sloth when he described Frank's actions.
Mm-hmm.
Because this reminded me of when my good friend Tiny and I read Barker's book, The Damnation Game, And she explained that she had seen the 7 deadly sins reflected in that work.
Right.
So, with that in mind, I sat back and really started contemplating the Hellbound Heart. And upon doing so, I saw that lust was a really huge factor of this book.
It was.
And if we consider the eating habits of the antagonist, we also have gluttony.
Right.
And without giving away any spoilers, pride, greed, and wrath are totally seen in Frank and Julia's characters.
Mm-hmm.
And we even do have vanity that shows up when Frank tells Julia, "Don't look at me."
Right.
And then we have where Barker ties the word sloth to Frank.
Mm-hmm.
And even though throughout the book Frank is too weak to do anything, this word does fit him perfectly.
It does. And finally, there is a duality between pain and pleasure. And while it is believed that these two subjects are polar opposites, Barker shows that there is only a thin schism between the two. Like, a good example of this is when Kirsty hears a man scream in the house, and Barker notes whether or not did she hear pleasure or is she hearing terror inside the house. And he also notes that it can be a really easy thing to mistake, trying to judge the two, whether it's somebody hurt or somebody
Enjoying it. So, in reality, similar to the rush that pleasure gives us, pain causes the central nervous system to release endorphins. And this can give us a heightened sense of adrenaline or euphoria. So, in that regards, not all pain is suffering, and some pain can be pleasurable. As a matter of fact, I once read a philosophy that broke it down into these simple terms by saying, not all pain is suffering, but all suffering is pain. So,
that's deep.
Right?
That's deep.
Also, it's believed that pain and pleasure are the most basic motivations for humankind, which Barker demonstrates perfectly here with his characters. And he even takes it a step further by putting those subjects into the hands of the Cenobites, who take it over the edge. Overall, The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker was creepy and gruesome. And when I considered that only a puzzle box is what separated us from being with the Cenobites, I felt like this was actually a really frightening concept.
Right. I mean, the book really didn't gross me out. It didn't scare me or creep me out or anything. But I really thought the Cenobites and the story in general was really good. And it kept me on the edge of my seat the whole time. And it was really just a thought-provoking book.
Yes. The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker is a novella that can easily be read in one sitting. Like, check it out. So very thin. And if you are looking for a classic splatterpunk book that's full of iconic characters and perversions aplenty, then I do highly recommend The Hellbound Heart, and I recommend that you read it in September.
I highly recommend it as well. It is such a good book. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. It really kept me guessing the whole time, especially the Cenobites. It kept me engaged. It is a short read, but it packs in a lot of commentary. It will definitely get you and your friends talking.
And what you said is 100% true, because I would like to talk more about this book, but we don't have time to do so. And I just really feel like what we touched is only a grain of what this book presents. So, yeah, definitely read it and read it with friends.
Do it.
So, now that we have all of that covered, I would just like to thank Blake Kelly for sending me this awesome box that we had used earlier in the video. This is the puzzle box that was inspired by The Hellbound Heart and Hellraiser, which, if you turn it one way, it's a music box. But if you turn this the other way, it opens up and you have worms inside. Like, how flipping cool is that? Also, while we're acknowledging Blake, we would just like to tell him congratulations!
Congratulations!
Because we have learned that he and his partner, Will, are engaged and they are soon to be married. So, yes, nothing but love from us to y'all, and we hope everything turns out well. We hope the wedding is just as beautiful as can be. So, yes, congratulations.
Congrats.
So now that it's time to close out, it was so great to have you return.
Me, I'm so glad. Thank you for having me back.
I'm so glad I finally busted your Barker cherry.
Yes, I really enjoyed it. It was such a fun read. It was a fun read.
Yes, and we're probably going to have you back in a few videos ahead from this one.
Yeah.
Because we're planning to buddy read Pork Pie Hat with Peter Straub.
Yes.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
But yeah, we're going to totally have you back for that book.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for coming back.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
And we'll see you before Halloween.
I'll be here.
Well, before we close out, I would like to thank these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. As you can tell, some of the names listed here are creators, so be sure to check out their work. And if you would like to contribute to my Patreon as well, I have a link available in the description section of this episode, where for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos. And if there is a profession you would like for me to tie to your name, just let me know and I'll include that as well. Also, I do have a $10 tier available where I do creepy photography on the side. So at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over one of my creepy photos. And once you receive that, you can print it off, do whatever you like. And of course, that does include the shout out that you see here. So if you're able to do that, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. If you would like to follow me on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are all available in the description section of this episode. And if you would like to spoil me, I have included a link to my Amazon wish list as well. Also, if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell because I have more book reviews coming in the near future. So, until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.